Donkey Kong Bananza has just been released to critical and commercial acclaim across the board. Pretty much everyone other than ragebait accounts on Twitter have been singing this game's praises because it's really good. Naturally, some have also compared the game to Super Mario Odyssey. Not only is it basically the Mario Odyssey of the Switch 2, being the big 3D platformer released within the first few months of the system's launch, but it also has a very similar gameplay loop and was made by the same development team. While I normally don't like to compare games that aren't in the same series, these games are so similar and are in the same timeline/universe, so they might as well be the same series. I'm someone who loved Super Mario Odyssey when it came out, and it has remained my favorite 3D Mario game to this day. So, how does DK Bananza stack up to it? Well, that's what I'm aiming to answer today. I'll be putting these two games against each other in 7 different categories to answer which one is my favorite and why. Also, keep in mind that there will be spoilers for the entirety of both games, so you've been warned. And without further ado, let's start with the movement and abilities. One of the best aspects of Super Mario Odyssey that even people who are critical of the game still praise is the movement and controls. Mario has all of his moves from Mario 64, as well as a bunch of new movement options that Cappy provides. While I do still enjoy the simplicity of the movement in games like Galaxy and 3D World, Mario Odyssey has my favorite movement in the series. It's easy to learn, but hard to master, which is why this game has such a prominent and interesting speedrunning community. Then you have the capture mechanic, which adds a whole new slew of abilities and movement options for Mario to use. Being able to take over enemies and have their attributes as a part of your moveset is still awesome, and they do a lot of creative things with it. Classic Mario enemies like the Bullet Bill or Hammer Bro get recontextualized with the capture mechanic, and new enemies such as the Uproot and Pokio are created to provide unique gameplay scenarios with the capture ability. This also makes way for awesome fan service like being able to capture Bowser in the ending and Yoshi in the postgame. The capture mechanic effectively replaces power-ups, but with the amount of captures that there are, it leads to so much more gameplay variety. Overall, the movement of Mario in this game is the best in the series, and the capture ability is a great concept that does a lot to spice up the gameplay. In Donkey Kong Bananza, DK doesn't have nearly as many movement options, but the abilities he does have are way more fleshed out than in Mario Odyssey. The game focuses more on combat than platforming when it comes to both the level design, which I'll talk about later, and DK's moveset. His moveset mainly focuses on punching and climbing, you know, what Donkey Kong does after all, but he can also pick up pieces of the terrain. This lets the player manipulate the world around them in unique ways not typically seen in platformers or really most other games in general. DK has quite the unconventional moveset, but considering the game is designed entirely around this, it works really well. However, that isn't all these abilities have to offer. Donkey Kong Bananza introduces a skill tree that is used to upgrade all of DK's abilities. These upgrades provide improvements you'd expect, like more health and a stronger punch, but they can also unlock entirely new abilities like the jump shot. Skill points are obtained through collecting bananas, which adds a new element to collecting not seen in Mario Odyssey. I love the addition of the skill tree here, as it adds a new level of depth to DK's abilities and is balanced wonderfully, not making you feel super overpowered by the end. The final part of DK's moveset that I've yet to mention is the banana transformations. These allow DK to temporarily transform into a powered up version of an animal that has unique attributes and looks so creepy and weird, but I love them. You can activate these transformations at pretty much any time as long as your Bananergy meter is full from collecting gold. You unlock 5 transformations throughout the game, being Kong, Zebra, Ostrich, Elephant, and Snake. Kong powers up your strength, allowing you to break concrete surfaces that would be too tough otherwise. Zebra allows you to run faster and dash across crumbling platforms that DK would normally fall through. Ostrich gives DK the ability to glide over long distances and be propelled upwards with wind geysers. Elephant lets DK suck up the surrounding terrain with his trunk and turn it into rocks you can throw at enemies. And finally, Snake allows you to jump much higher and slow down time for a short period. I really like all of these transformations, even if I found myself rarely using Zebra or Ostrich outside of when they were required to progress or grab a banana. It's kinda like they took the idea of captures from Mario Odyssey fleshed them out a bit more, and made them into permanent abilities, which is really cool. They're all used in creative ways as well, and if you're stuck on a boss or a banana puzzle, chances are all you need to do is use one of the Bananza transformations to give yourself a leg up. It also seems like there could have been plans for giraffe and lion transformations because of the canyon and feast layers clearly having elements of those respective animals. It's even hinted that those animals did live in those layers, but eventually migrated to the surface. While those definitely would have been cool to see, I think all of the bases are covered here with the transformations that we got. Even though I've spent the last few minutes talking about how great DK's moveset and transformations are, I'm still gonna give this point to Mario Odyssey. To me, nothing beats the fluidity of Odyssey's movement, with it being easy to learn but hard to fully master. Bananza's moveset doesn't really feel that way though. Because the game has a lesser emphasis on platforming, there aren't as many cool move combos or crazy tech to learn. And as much as I love Bananza's transformations, part of me prefers the variety of the capture mechanic that leads to many different gameplay scenarios and fan service moments. Like seriously, being able to capture and play as Bowser is still one of the coolest moments in any Nintendo game. This was a pretty close point though, as I believe both of these games have great movement and they excel in different areas. But that being said, point 1 has gotta go to Super Mario Odyssey. Perhaps the most striking similarity between these two games is their progression and collectibles. The progression is almost the same between the games, with you going to an open area, completing a few objectives, usually fighting a boss, and then traveling to the next. You even have the branching paths with the lake and wooded kingdoms in Mario Odyssey and the freezer and forest layers in Bananza. Moons and bananas are treated very similarly in their respective games. You find them both throughout the kingdoms/layers by platforming, solving puzzles, and completing objectives. Both games even have a special animation and jingle every time you collect one. The main difference between these collectibles is their function. Moons are used for progression, while bananas earn you points to use in the skill tree. This makes collecting bananas much less of a necessity, but I feel like there's almost more of a reason to seek them out as they unlock tangible rewards other than progressing through the game. There are about 60 more moons than there are bananas, but because many of the bananas are in bunches of 3 or 5, your total banana count by the time you find all 777 of them will be in the 900s. You need 500 moons to unlock all of the post-game content in Mario Odyssey, and 600 bananas in Bananza to finish its post-game. However, I ended up going for all of them in each game, and I can say they are a very similar experience. You can also buy moons/bananas to max out the counter in each game, but that usually requires you to grind for money. There isn't that much of a reason to do this in Mario Odyssey, but in Bananza, you need 1000 bananas to max out the skill tree. And as much as I don't want to admit it, yes, I did go for all 1000 bananas, and I actually don't really regret it because it only took me like 30 to 45 minutes of grinding. A lot of people complained about the moons in Mario Odyssey feeling repetitive and unmemorable, with many of them being repeated in different kingdoms. I personally didn't have that much of an issue with this, but I certainly get where people are coming from. When going for 100% after beating the game, it can get a bit exhausting trying to find everything, which is why I often did my collecting in bursts, doing a kingdom or two at a time. I felt pretty much the same when completing DK Bananza, but I feel like it was kind of worse in a way. In my opinion, the banana count in Bananza feels way more bloated than it did in Mario Odyssey. Because there is less of an emphasis on platforming, a lot of the bananas are either just sitting in plain sight or are buried underground somewhere. I still found them fun to collect, and thankfully the radar made it easy to find bananas hidden in walls or underground, so I wasn't ripping my hair out, but it felt way less rewarding when I found a banana versus finding a moon in Mario Odyssey. The repeated objectives are also here, but I didn't mind them too much, especially since most of them involve some sort of puzzle to unlock the bananas, like the hidden fractones, for example. But you do get 3 bananas in several of the areas just by feeding gold to the Grotone, and it's just like, if this isn't padding, I don't know what is. Mario Odyssey definitely had its fair share of padding, but it also had a greater variety of objectives to complete. I found the subrooms in Bananza to be pretty fun. It felt like there weren't as many of these in this game as there were in Mario Odyssey, but I haven't counted exactly how many there were, so I could be wrong. However, instead of getting 2 bananas per subroom like you did moons in Odyssey, it's 3. In Mario Odyssey, you got one moon for completing the subroom and one that was hidden somewhere in it. It's the same in Bananza, except you get another banana for getting halfway through the level in addition to one for completing it. Again, this feels kinda like padding to me. Now, I know this doesn't apply to every subroom because sometimes 2 of the bananas are hidden in the level, but that is rarely the case. I did like the arena levels though, since they used Bananza's emphasis on combat to its advantage and often used creative combinations of mechanics not seen much throughout the game. I don't dislike collecting in either of these games, but I found the repetitiveness and amount of collectibles to be much more of an issue in Bananza than it was in Mario Odyssey. Oh yeah, and there's also other collectibles. Fossils and purple coins are basically the same, as they can be used to buy clothing in the kingdom/lair that they're found in. However, unlike Mario Odyssey, there aren't any clothes to buy for DK outside of these fossils, meaning there's less character customization overall. In general, I prefer the customization in Odyssey because there are way more options and there are so many more references to other characters and games in the Mario franchise. Though, being able to change DK's fur color is awesome, and there are way more options here than I thought there would be. I prefer collecting the purple coins over the fossils because they are usually found in bunches of 2 or 3, meaning they are much easier to find. I don't think there was a single layer in DK Bananza where I didn't buy at least one fossil map to find ones that I was missing. And finally, you have the discs in Bananza, which you find mostly by defeating enemies, but some of them are obtained through completing the Bananza rehearsals in the post-game. I had a ton of fun completing both of these games, but I'm gonna also give this point to Mario Odyssey because I prefer its emphasis on platforming when it comes to collecting moons, and I like the customization more. Now this is where Donkey Kong Bananza gets to really shine. I don't think the story in either of these games is life-changing or anything, but I think they both do a good job considering they're Nintendo games made for all ages that put gameplay above anything else. For this point, I'll quickly summarize the stories of both games and then compare the two of them. Super Mario Odyssey opens in the middle of a fight between Mario and Bowser on an airship. After Mario loses the fight and his hat is torn to shreds, Bowser flies off with Princess Peach and Mario is sent to the Cap Kingdom. After meeting and befriending a Bonneton resident named Cappy, Mario chases after Bowser to stop his plans of marrying Peach. Mario travels through several kingdoms where Bowser stops to obtain items for his wedding with Peach. Along the way, Mario battles both Bowser and his wedding planners, named the Broodals, several times. Eventually, the two face off on the moon, where the wedding is being held. After crashing the wedding and beating Bowser, Mario has to take control of Bowser in order to escape the collapsing area, all while a bangin' vocal track plays in the background. In the end, Mario, Bowser, and Peach escape, but Peach rejects both of their advances as she leaves to have her own adventure across the kingdoms, free from Bowser's capture. The story is pretty simple all things considered, but the ending, where you crash a wedding on the moon and take control of Bowser to escape, is absolute cinema. In Donkey Kong Bananza, DK is a part of a mining operation on Ingot Isle that is jeopardized by the Void Company, a group of Kongs who want to steal all of the precious Banandium gems for themselves. After being plunged underground by Void, DK meets a weird talking rock and heads deeper into the earth to chase after Void and return the stolen Banandium gems. After meeting the Kong Elder in Lagoon Lair, it is revealed that the talking rock is actually a young girl named Pauline, who was turned into the rock by Void. The two decide to continue deeper below the surface to stop Void, get more bananas, and find the Banandium root in the planet core that can grant any wish, which Pauline wants to use to get back to the surface. Along the way, the duo faces the Void Company several times and meets the Elders to teach them new Bananza transformations. DK and Pauline catch up to Void in the Forbidden Lair, where Void reveals that Pauline needs to use her singing powers to awaken the Banandium root for him. After fighting Void without singing as to not give him the chance to grab the root, Void turns DK into a rock just like he did with Pauline, who is now forced to sing in order to free him. However, this results in her awakening the Banandium root, which isn't actually the Banandium root. In reality, it is King K. Rool, who is now back to take the real Banandium root for himself as he easily beats Void Kong. That's right, K. Rool is now the final antagonist of the game. DK and Pauline follow K. Rool into the planet core, where they face off against him and win, allowing them to take the Banandium root. The root turns into a giant pillar of bananas, which sends them rocketing back up to the surface. ending the game. Except, it isn't actually the end. After a fake credit sequence calling back to the original Donkey Kong Country, K. Rool flies after them and they fight him off to reach the surface. He ends up flying away, and the duo shoots up into New Donk City, but that still isn't the end as K. Rool takes over the city and becomes the King of Rot. In one final battle, DK and Pauline beat K. Rool for good and save the city. Pauline decides to stay and become a singer, while DK returns underground to find more bananas, finally ending the game. I think both of these stories have their own awesome moments, but DK Bananza easily takes the cake here. Not only does K. Rool become the secret final antagonist in an awesome twist, but he gets an epic 3-phase boss fight and he takes over New Donk City in an awesome ending set piece. Pauline also has a character arc throughout the game where she learns to be confident in her singing. At the beginning of the game, she reluctantly sings to use the Kong Bananza, and by the end, she wants to sing for the entirety of New Donk City. It's nothing crazy, but it's wholesome and it shows how Pauline grew to love singing in the first place. Cause yeah, it isn't entirely confirmed, but DK Bananza is probably a prequel to Mario Odyssey, with the Pauline we see here being the same one in that game, which I think is pretty cool. My only criticism with the ending is that we don't really get to see K. Rool do that much. I mean, yeah, he does take over the entire city, but since he's only brought into the story at the very end, we don't get to see him and his Kremlings throughout the story, which is a shame. I know this would have taken away from the awesome twist that was seeing him in the Forbidden Lair, but I think it would have been cool if the Void Company was working for K. Rool from the beginning, kind of like the Brutals in Mario Odyssey. This way, we would have felt his presence throughout the entire story. Speaking of Mario Odyssey and the Brutals, I found the Void Company to be way more interesting than they were. Grumpy and Poppy Kong get to be actual characters once they leave Void, and Void himself does a great job at being the main villain for most of the story. Same thing goes for Pauline and Cappy. I think Pauline is a way better partner character and she has a much greater impact on the story overall. I still like the story of Mario Odyssey for what it is, but for me, Donkey Kong Bananza blows it out of the water. This point easily goes to DK. Oh boy, this is another close one. Both of these games have great level design and mechanics that make them super fun to play through again and again. Most of Odyssey's level design relies on the capture abilities, which makes a lot of sense. As I mentioned before, these abilities are used to recontextualize old enemies in new scenarios or to create brand new enemies to be used for a specific purpose. You've got the T-Rex in the Cascade Kingdom, Uproots in the Wooded Kingdom, Tropical Wigglers in the Lost Kingdom, Gushins in the Seaside Kingdom, the Pokio in Bowser's Kingdom, and more that all introduce unique and creative mechanics to their areas. There's a ton of cool stuff in this game, with a lot of variety too. The boss fights are also amazing. About half of them require you to use one of the capture abilities to beat it, which makes every fight feel fresh. Even the bosses that don't use the capture mechanic still have unique elements to them, like using Bowser's hat against him in his fights. My only real criticism with the bosses is that you fight the same ones a lot. You fight each of the Brutals, including Madame Brood and Bowser, twice throughout the main story, which is unfortunate because I would have liked to see more new bosses use more capture abilities. When it comes to the theming of Odyssey's kingdoms, it is top notch. With the game being a globe-trotting adventure, there are obviously a huge variety of places to explore, and many of them are incredibly unique. You've got the monochrome Cap Kingdom, the frozen desert in the Sand Kingdom, the realistic-looking Metro Kingdom, the serene Seaside Kingdom, the colorful and unique Luncheon Kingdom, the dark and gritty Ruin Kingdom, and the gorgeous Bowser's Kingdom. Sure, not all of the kingdoms here are heavy hitters, the Cloud and Ruin Kingdoms are effectively just boss arenas, and Mario interacting with realistic humans is still pretty cursed, but the majority of these kingdoms are amazing with their theming. And the fact that almost all of them are tied into Bowser's wedding plans is the cherry on top. Mario Odyssey has amazing world design with its kingdoms. However, DK Bananza excels at something entirely different when it comes to its layers, and that is synergy and creativity. Mario Odyssey no doubt has some amazing mechanics, but Bananza's different types of terrain are revolutionary. It's already incredible that you can destroy and manipulate pretty much all of the terrain around you, but the fact that there are several different types of terrain that have various properties and react with each other in different ways is genius. Unfortunately, a lot of the cool stuff isn't introduced until at least a few hours into the game, but it's still great. You've got the ice that can be thrown to freeze over lava in the freezer layer, these berries in the forest layer that can be thrown at wood to create platforms, chunks that will make you levitate when you pick them up in the resort layer, the light mechanic that changes the properties of platforms and enemies in the radiance layer, the muck that can be neutralized by throwing salt at it in the feast layer, and more. These mechanics all synergize extremely well together and are often used in really creative ways that impressed me a lot. However, when it comes to the bosses, DK Bananza kinda struggles. Not only do you fight several bosses multiple times, but they are insanely easy and can be easily cheesed with the Bananza abilities. Like, seriously, why was I able to beat Grumpy Kong in less than a minute this late into the game? The K-Rool fights are easily the best ones here, as they are actually kinda tough and are amazing set pieces. Some of them do use the mechanics of the game in creative ways, with Muckety Muck being a perfect example of this, but overall, the bosses aren't nearly as good as they are in Mario. Why did I just... Overall, the bosses aren't nearly as great as in Mario Odyssey. The same goes for the theming of the different layers, in my opinion. I think the synergy between the theming and mechanics of the layers work really well. Mechanics like the ice cream in the freezer layer and the salt in the feast layer fit perfectly with the aesthetic of the area. However, the actual layer themes themselves aren't always the most compelling, especially in the beginning of the game. The hilltop, canyon, resort, landfill, and forbidden layers don't do a lot to stand out to me and are pretty generic. And then you've got the Tempest and Radiance layers, which are no doubt some of the best layers mechanically, but when it comes to aesthetics, they tend to blend together for me. They both have a pretty generic cave aesthetic that isn't bad, but considering they are some of the biggest layers in the game, I wish they did a bit more to stand out. However, I do think many of the other areas, especially the Feast layer, are amazing when it comes to their theming. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that the Feast layer is probably my favorite in the game. I know I've spent the last section criticizing Bananza's world design, but I think I'm still gonna give the point to that game. While I love the level design in Mario Odyssey, I prefer the mechanics in Bananza, and I love the synergy the layers and mechanics have in that game. I do prefer the theming in Odyssey, but it also has its fair share of stinkers like the Cloud and Snow Kingdoms. So, when it's all said and done, I prefer the world design in DK Bananza, which is something I would have been shocked to hear myself say when I was first playing the beginning of the game. And with that, the score is now an even 2-2. This is kind of a hard category to compare these two in because Mario Odyssey is at a clear disadvantage considering it was made for much weaker hardware. So, that being said, yes, DK Bananza looks objectively better than Super Mario Odyssey from a pure graphic standpoint when it comes to things like textures. Despite this, the games actually run at a pretty comparable resolution. DK Bananza runs between 1080p and 1200p when docked, while Mario Odyssey ran around 900p when docked on Switch 1. With the Switch 2 update for the game though, it can now run at an upscaled 4K, which is awesome. However, I'm going to just compare the original releases of these games because I haven't had time to really mess around with Odyssey on Switch 2, and all of the footage you've seen throughout this video was captured on Switch 1. Unfortunately, the performance of DK Bananza does leave something to be desired. The game has pretty notable frame rate drops at a rate that I wouldn't describe as being frequent, but I also wouldn't describe it as being a rare occurrence. Everyone is bound to notice a frame drop at least once during their playthrough, especially during the crazy boss fights, which is something I couldn't really say about Mario Odyssey. Sure, there were some frame drops in that game, but they were significantly more infrequent for me, and they were way less memorable than any performance dip I've experienced in DK Bananza. Regardless, I think both of these games look gorgeous. Considering how much Bananza has going on every time you boot it up, it's impressive it even runs this well. Odyssey still looks amazing too, but considering it's almost 8 years old now, it is starting to show its age compared to games releasing today. And then we get to the art style of the game. DK Bananza has a much more consistent art style than Mario Odyssey does. All of the layers feel like they fit in the same world, and all of the different NPC and enemy types fit well together. However, I wouldn't say Odyssey's lack of consistent art style is a criticism, considering the entire point of the game is that you are traveling between various different kingdoms. It makes sense that many of them would look different from one another. I think this variety of styles and locales actually gives Odyssey more of an identity, believe it or not. Yeah, it's weird to see Mario interacting with realistic looking humans, but that's part of what makes this game special. I know many people don't like the inconsistent art style of the game, especially when it comes to things like the Ruin Kingdom, because even I'll admit this doesn't really fit that well in a Mario game. But I personally enjoyed the chaos, and it's a big reason why I wanted to see them expand on the game in a sequel. However, I think what gives DK the edge over Mario in this category are the animations. The characters are so expressive and have tons of personality. I love this cutscene of Pauline being nervous to sing. I love DK's dopey face every time he grabs a banana. And I love how delightfully villainous Void and K. Rool are. Even though I didn't vibe with DK's new design at first,
why does Donkey Kong look like that?
It's really grown on me in the last few months, and I honestly might prefer it over his country design that he's had for decades now. Even though I appreciate Odyssey's lack of a consistent art style because it makes sense in the context of the game, I'm gonna give this point to Bananza for its still amazing art style and expressive characters. Both of these games have incredible soundtracks and feature a mix of new and nostalgic tunes. Super Mario Odyssey has various musical styles throughout its soundtrack, which makes sense considering the globe-trotting adventure that the game holds. From the adventurous Fossil Falls, to the groovy Steam Gardens, bustling New Donk City, funky Mount Volbono, and the foreboding Bowser's Castle. There's so much to love in this soundtrack, and that's not even mentioning the vocal themes, which are just mwah, chef's kiss. Jump Up Superstar is an incredible jazzy tune that is perhaps the most iconic song from this game, and for good reason.
It's time to jump up in the air. Jump up, don't be scared. Jump up and your cares will soar away.
It is so good. But what I think is criminally underrated is Break Free, which plays during the Bowser escape scene. I think this song is better than Jump Up Superstar, and the lyrics represent the journey the player and Mario have just gone on. It's so beautiful. This is Mario's equivalent of Live and Learn, or His World, or Endless Possibility, or any other Sonic Finale track. Break Free is genuinely the most underrated part of Super Mario Odyssey in my opinion, and more people need to talk about it. And then you have Donkey Kong Bananza, which also has an amazing soundtrack. This game relies heavily on old tunes for some sections, which I find to be totally acceptable considering it's been over a decade since DK got a new game. Also, hearing Sticker Brush Symphony in the big 2025 was so peak that I don't even care if this is nostalgia pandering at this point. The area themes are a lot less bombastic than in Mario Odyssey, with them opting to go for a more ambient sound most of the time, which makes sense for the context of this game. However, there are still some great tracks in here. Lagoon Layer, the lava area of the freezer layer, Resort Layer, Tempest Layer, and Feast Lair all have amazing themes. And I would be remiss not to mention the new remix of Gangplank Galleon, which some people are saying is even better than the Smash Ultimate version. I personally wouldn't go that far, but it's still really good. However, I wouldn't say that most of the tracks, barring a few like Gangplank Galleon, are as great as the tracks in Super Mario Odyssey. That soundtrack is just so good and at this point so iconic that it's hard to top. The real standouts of the soundtrack, though, are the Bananza transformation tracks, which play every time you transform into a specific Bananza. These are sort of vocal tracks, as Pauline sings in the background, but it's mostly just gibberish. These are all great, and despite you hearing them dozens of times throughout the game, they never got repetitive or annoying to me. Breaking Through is the main vocal theme for this game, though it is sung in English. This plays during the credits, and it's really good.
We're breaking through, down to the core. No stopping us, not anymore. Inside the storm, I found the key. Your beat rang out, my voice has been released.
It's much more melancholy than Jump Up Superstar or Break Free, which is why I don't think I liked it as much as those. It's still amazing though, and I could totally see it growing on me over time. There is also gibberish voice acting in both games, which works pretty well. However, Pauline in DK Bananza actually has full voice acting, which I found to be awesome. I was worried at first that she would become annoying because of how often she talks during normal gameplay, but even between both of the playthroughs I did, I never got annoyed with her. I think her random lines of dialogue actually add to both her character and her relationship with DK, which is really wholesome by the way. Overall, despite DK Bananza having a stellar soundtrack, I gotta give this point to Mario Odyssey. In my opinion, that game just has way more bangers and is way more memorable to me. There's a reason why Steam Gardens and New Donk City alone are used in like half of the videos posted on YouTube these days. Odyssey's soundtrack is amazing. And now it's time for the final point. These two games are neck and neck, but which one will come out on top? Well, it's time to find out. I played Super Mario Odyssey back in March and completely 100% in the game right before the big Switch 2 Direct happened. A big reason for this was that I was expecting an Odyssey 2 to be announced that day, but what we ended up getting was the next best thing. I ended up playing the game twice a few months ago, once to fully 100% the game again for the first time in years, and a second time where I was speeding through the game to get footage of some areas that had somehow gotten corrupted the first time around. When DK Bananza came out about a month ago, I was actually in Europe on vacation, and I ended up playing it during my free time there. I beat the game right before making it home between the plane rides, train rides, and several delays I experienced, and then I ended up 100%ing the game in the next few days after I got home. However, I knew that I wanted to make a video on the game, so I did the same thing that I did for Super Mario Odyssey and did another playthrough where I sorta sped through the game just to get footage. My point with saying all of this is that I have already been able to gauge how replayable both of these games are. Super Mario Odyssey is replayable in a weird type of way. I wouldn't recommend regularly 100%ing it, but it's worth at least blasting through the main story every once in a while. It's a relatively short experience when you're doing that, and because most of the progression is based on collecting moons, you can have a different experience each time you play by going for different moons. When it comes to DK Bananza, it is a much longer game that has a lot to it, but I actually preferred replaying this game. Maybe it was partially because it was my first time doing so, and because the game was fresh in my mind, I was able to test my memory and find many of the bananas and fossils that had given me trouble my first time around with ease. However, in general, I think people are going to prefer returning to this game more frequently than to Mario Odyssey. Something that I found a lot of people bring up when comparing Mario Odyssey to Breath of the Wild back in the day was how the game wasn't aiming to be anything revolutionary, it just wanted to perfect the 3D Mario formula. Breath of the Wild redefined not just the Zelda series, but the entire open world genre, whereas Mario Odyssey was kinda just a great game in its series. Rather than being revolutionary, it was evolutionary. revolutionary and made many improvements on a pre-existing formula. Sure, many of the mechanics were revolutionary for the series, like not being kicked out of the level every time you found a collectible and the capture mechanic, but none of it was something we'd never seen in a platformer before. But when it comes to DK Bananza, this game does so many unique things. I wouldn't say the game has completely redefined the genre or anything, but it brings so much new to the table and is insanely impressive. I don't think every developer is going to be copying this game for the next few years, but it definitely has left its mark on the wider gaming industry, at least to me. Being able to destroy the entire environment and use the different types of terrain to solve puzzles and find secrets is so much fun. There have probably been games that have done similar things before, but the way it's executed here makes the mechanics feel unique. Something else to consider is that the Nintendo Switch 2 is also very new. When Mario Odyssey came out, the Switch 1 had been out for over 6 months, with several system-selling games already being released for the thing. DK Bananza came out only a month after the Switch 2 launched, with the only other big first-party title released being Mario Kart World. While this is certainly a topic for another video, I personally don't think Mario Kart World did a great job at introducing us to this new hardware and providing us with a substantial launch experience. However, I feel like DK Bananza has filled that purpose, and to me, it feels like the first truly next-gen Nintendo game. Not only does this game innovate on platformers by providing a unique and creative experience, but it is also innovating on Nintendo as a whole, with it being one of the first big games created for this new system. If you couldn't tell, this point definitely goes to DK Bananza. I think both of these games are really replayable and innovate in their own ways, but Bananza beats Odyssey in both of those areas for me. So, I guess that makes Donkey Kong Bananza the winner, which is really weird to be saying. I went into this game with a partially pessimistic mindset, if I'm being honest. After being burned by Mario Kart World and all of the many controversies surrounding the Switch 2 launch, I was looking forward to this game, but I was also worried and not entirely convinced that it could fill the 3D Mario-shaped void I've felt for the last 8 years. Super Mario Odyssey is one of my favorite games of all time, so I had prepared myself by considering the possibility that this game would be a disappointment and not live up to it. If need be, I was prepared to make an entire video ripping this game a new one, but I didn't need to. Super Mario Odyssey means so much to me. It was the game I got with my Switch for Christmas in 2017, and even though it's only been about 8 years since then, I'm nostalgic for that game. So I don't mean this lightly when I say Donkey Kong Bananza is better. Granted, the games are still really close for me as they both excel at different things and are incredible and unique in their own ways, but I think I've settled on Bananza being the better game, at least for now. Who knows, my opinion could change tomorrow though. It's like having to choose your favorite child. I don't want to do it, but if I had to, this would be my decision. Donkey Kong Bananza is an incredible game that has restored my faith in Nintendo, at least for the time being until they make another stupid decision like raising the prices of the Switch 1 or something like that. But yeah, that would never happen, right? Right? Thank you guys so much for watching this video and making it to the end. It truly means a lot to me. Recently, I've been in kind of a motivational drought when it comes to making videos, but with this one, I think I might have that motivation back, so I'm excited to put out more stuff. Because originally, I was going to do a video solely dedicated to Mario Odyssey, and I was also going to do a separate video ranking every Donkey Kong game, including Bananza, but those just both kind of fell through because I just didn't have any motivation. However, as you can see, I kind of combined the two of those videos in a way to make this one, which I'm really proud of, and even though it was still on the longer end, I had a lot of fun making it. But yeah, I have a few other videos planned for the future. However, I am about to move out for college, so I don't know how all of that is going to pan out. Regardless, I will still be here though, and I will still be working on videos when I can. So make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for it, I guess. And also like and comment if you liked the video, or dislike and comment if you didn't. Tell me how bad it was. And yeah, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Ooh, banana.